hearing people's stories of disconnection, disempowerment, not being seen, not being heard.
Like our Western world is about individual success, individual failures. It's been an intention to kind of separate us psychologically and even physically at times.
It's not
back
just
to our
having
right?
barbecues in the park with your friends, right? It's also hearing back how we're failing as a system and as leaders.
How's your day? Well, how's it going? Tell me a word and a little bit about why you said that word.
You wish I could just, if I could just be
You can do it.
summarized
You
in
can
one
do it.
word,
I
that
know
would
you
just
can.
be, that would be a miracle. Melancholy is always with me. The world is beautiful and sad stories at the same time. And,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
I kind of appreciate and maybe intentionally put myself in the path of a lot of those sad stories, just because I think sometimes it's a good way to start building care for yourself, for your family, for other people. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure you're the same, but I'm also pretty sure that's not the answer you wanted. And so,
That's okay.
I mean,
It's your answer, though.
it's a
That's all.
Thursday. It's like we're in a nice mid-sized Ontario city. We had a we had a chance to connect with a
Very-
lot of people this week already.
yeah, for sure.
I work a cool job. I have nice friends. I woke up with some hope today. I did.
It's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I probably, if I'm really honest with you, I couched it first by saying melancholy because I feel guilty when I feel hopeful. I feel like, oh
Uh,
my gosh, do I deserve hope? Do I it's, you know,
why aren't you like embodying not your own hopefulness, but hopefulness for others, the world, the whatever? Like, I think you're not saying, I hope I'm good. I hope my day is amazing. I think when I hear you say hope, and I've spent a lot of time with you, you're saying, I'm feeling hopeful that things could be okay, even for today, right? There's something in there. You've never selfishly wanted hope in all the time I've known you.
yeah, thanks.
No, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's true.
if you feel hope for real, then you kind of emanate it a bit, and the people who you see in your day maybe get to feel a little taste of that.
Hope never feels like a selfish word to me, though. Like, it doesn't feel, unless you say, I hope I win the lottery. Even there might be, then I can give it all away.
I
But
hope you do win the lottery.
hope doesn't, I'd have to play it. But, but hope doesn't feel like a selfish word to me. So I would say that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
man. Yeah.
Okay. How would you summarize your vibe, your feelings?
Yeah. I don't know. Today, I think sun is always helpful. I can see it, and there's hope in there. Yeah, like you, I always wake up with a little bit of anxiety, worry, like just about the world, our work. We know there's a lot of people who don't have what they need, and we kind of know there's some of the reasons why. So,
Yeah.
but I will say every day at some point, whether it's early or midday, I try to grab love. And I know I even say it a lot, so I'm trying to kind of summon it even when I don't have it at my fingertips. But yeah, I think you mentioned our volunteer event, and I just, I get to see you, I get to see people I love, and I get to spend time with them. So I've tried to learn that as a point of gratitude. Like, there it is, things happen, things are weird, shitty, your day gets thrown off. And I always try and ground myself in that idea, like, okay, what are the things? Where do I find love? Where's that connection? How lucky am I? So,
Yeah, you
but like you,
asked.
it's always a mixed bag between those two. Like, I'm like, oh my God, things are gonna, whoa, what do I do? Or resource scarcity, or you hear tariffs, whatever the words, and I'm like, how's it gonna impact the people I love?
Yeah.
But maybe that's how I want to end the sentence, not like, oh no, but then
Ooh, good
bring
one.
it back to love. Like, how to
Bring it
ground
back to
it?
love.
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, you said at one point you taught me something really powerful. Like I don't know, 5 years ago, you started saying in challenging situations, or if you feel even yourself in a dip, you kind of ask yourself like, what would the loving solution look like? What would
Hmm.
love look like? What would it be like right now
Okay.
if we answered in love, with love? That's a good question, and it's like I kind of, yeah, I ground myself in that question. So it usually leads to tears first. Okay, so you talked about this week. So we work for a charity in Guelph. that's supporting neighborhood groups across the city of Guelph. And it's, it's heartfelt work. It's a lot of relationships. It's also doing stuff, programs and services for people. And
Yeah.
this week you mentioned we we got to create, host, be in a room with people to kind of celebrate volunteerism, because next week is actually National Volunteer
There you go.
Appreciation Week. So we got out ahead of that a little.
Yeah.
And if there's 17 neighborhood groups in Guelph and they all have X number of
Yeah.
volunteers, what would you say? 20 at
At
least.
least regular. Like last year, I think when we looked at the numbers of something like 12 or 1300 people had volunteered a little bit
Yeah,
at least.
12 or
So
1300
holy
people,
smokes, right?
which
Like
would
when you
actually bust the fire code in that room. So I'm glad not everybody
yeah.
came out, but
Right, but it's tremendous. It's amazing. Like when you see that number, it's kind of it doesn't seem true, but it is.
so what was it? What was it like? So Tuesday night we gathered, in the evening hours, in a school cafetorium,
Yeah.
and we were trying to say thank you to all
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
volunteers, and we have this neat, I think, this neat annual tradition of inhabiting one of our organizational values and sort of inviting the 17 groups to nominate a standout person or two from their group
Yeah.
who really exemplify this value. And this year it was love and kindness, which is
Which
great.
again is cool, right? Like I love our values, how they were community created and sourced. So I love that one of ours. Of course I do, because I'm always trying to say love, but love and kindness is something one of our values. And like you said, you can always lean on that in a conversation, say, I know it was a tough day, but do you think you rooted that decision or that action in kindness and love? And if not, what would that look like? But yeah, for this event, that was it. So people threw out nominations. We created, I think, kind of beautiful, sweet little
Yeah.
certificates. And we had an organization donate some gift cards. So everyone got like a coffee card to go have a coffee with a friend or a new person. So people have sent us little nice messages saying, what a lovely evening. I had a great time. Food was great. I met a couple new folks. Like, I don't know. I like in this day, it feels like that's a lot. Like we
Yeah.
all need that
Yeah.
to
And
be part
we
of
need
our
to be
lives.
part of it, and we need to witness it both, just to come
Yeah.
back to hope. I mean, it's so wonderful in this life when metaphor works, when you're when it or when you can extend it. And so, love and kindness must come in so many different ways.
Yeah.
People must express it and look for it in so many different ways. So we have a couple people, a couple volunteers showing up early to help, like, move tables, set up chairs, and set the food out.
Yeah.
There's love and kindness in your act, in your labor.
Yeah.
And then we have the sort of table captains, like the people who you see. We build these little tables, round tables of 12 to 15 people sitting, and you can see one or two people kind of take the role of, like, mom, or table mom or
Right.
whatever.
Like
And
party host.
yeah, and they yeah, they sort of make sure everybody's talking, or
Yeah.
make sure people know each other. So there's love and kindness in, like, the connecting that people do. And then there's people, even Mo is one of them. And Muhammad comes, and to help celebrate with us, and he's comfortable going table to table to talk about those, like the garden, or what it means to start a cultural affinity group, what it means to get rec going for youth.
Right.
I
And to
know
trust, like, there's folks who you can say, "Can I introduce you to someone?" And they'll trust in that moment and let us help with that, or are up for the conversation. And then that's where I almost can see something sparkling off that, because I'm thinking, if Mo meets Jeff and they have a chat,
something might
something's
happen.
gonna, like,
Yeah,
this isn't gonna be their
something
only
is
chat, right?
bound to happen.
There's gonna be another chat. There's gonna be a resonance to that. So thinking about us, I can't. I think it's beautiful. I can't pinpoint it, but I'm assuming I first met you probably when you worked at the bookshelf. That's my assumption, but I don't know if you have a different.
I have a different. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I worked at the bookstore in Guelph called the Bookshelf for a long time, and you're such a good reader, and you would bring your family in there, and
Yeah.
I think we made a friendship there. But you were like the festival organizer, right? And you were
One of the folks who helped put on.
bringing
Yeah.
cool bands, and also making this sort of very hospitable environment on a cool organic farm.
It was pretty fun. Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess you were like the celebrity on site or the quiet celebrity, and I
I
was
feel
just
like
an
that was Will,
audience
but I
member.
was sure. Okay. Yeah.
And I think we met through mutual friends. But then you would come into the bookshelf, you would buy 3 papers a day and read them
Well,
all
maybe on the weekends, but yeah, yeah. Okay.
and talk about
That
good
was
books
before
and
I
good.
had children too, just as a little caveat there.
Well, you know what? Okay, I also remember you came in uh, while you were, because I think you got to stay home a bit with Mona, right?
Yeah. I
And
stayed home for a year and a half with her. Yeah, which was
and
a baby.
and and Mona was a wonderful little girl.
Chatty, funny,
Oh
like
my
cute.
gosh. So I would like break my sort of duties as like the clerk in the store and like hang out with you guys.
Yeah, you would come. We'd be in the kids' area
Talk,
reading books.
going to the kids. As long I always felt like as long as this could result in some appreciation for reading and stories, then I can make an argument that I'm doing
Right.
my
Yeah.
job.
There's something here. He might buy something. You never know, but
So you and then you I kind of watched your presence in the community
yeah.
and just as our paths entwined a bit more, I thought of you as probably this is a horrible thing for you to hear, but I thought of you as a community leader.
I love that we would know that of each other. A compliment might be a piercing thing to say.
Yeah, I did. I mean, and so then you should tell this story too, but one
Yeah.
day in the bookshelf you were like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm part of this cool thing that's happening
Well, let me even preface that. Like there Aaron Harvey, who was on the hiring team,
for
had
the
asked for
for the
this
neighborhood."
job that I now have as the director of the GNSC. We were having a coffee in the restaurant that was next to the bookshelf. I don't even know what name it had at that time. And she was saying, "What do you think? And would you come for an interview or whatever?" And you just happened to be passing through from maybe the bathroom, I don't know where, back to the bookshelf. And I said, "You know what? I'd think about taking that job if I can hire him." And she kind of laughed and but I hadn't thought of it because we were just having a chat. But when I saw you, I thought, yeah, like I just because I'd known you and just who you were in the world and just the space you occupied in my head, it was honest, but I didn't know I was thinking it till I saw you and pointed at you.
Hmm.
And then when I did get offered the job, we there was a new position, and I remember reaching out to you and saying, "Would you be interested in this?" Thinking you might not because you I saw you as like everyone in the world knew you. In fact, when you did take the job, people were mad at me because you weren't at the bookshelf. People were like, "Oh, did you take Dan away?" So I had to endure a little bit of that. But then I reached out and said, "Hey, man, do you want to have a chat? There's this thing I'm doing, and I think you'd be awesome."
Thank you.
I think we're
Yeah.
at Planet Bean. Like that's my memory. One of our chats
Yeah,
was at
maybe.
Planet Bean, and we had a tea and a coffee.
Well, I remember you were very gentle about it, like talk about it first, then share the job description after,
Right. Kind of.
and
I was
but
trying to lure you in a little
when
bit.
well, I mean, when I saw a bit more about what the job was, and there were things in there like, this job will take you all the whole to the whole community, like all to the boundaries, both physical and socioeconomic of this city.
Yeah.
Who are we? What do we do? And the lines of like working in the secret spaces, like the classrooms, church basements, lofts of
Right.
to build small community centers and community connection. I thought, wow, that is a dreamy job.
Did I trick you, do you think, now, like 11 years later or 12? Do you feel like I'd kind of duped you into it?
That
Or how do you feel?
I mean, do you want me to say yes, don't you?
A
You want me to
little
say
bit. Like, I think I didn't even know what I was asking you to do, but I think in that I gave you the kind of utopian vision. And maybe, I don't know, you seem to embrace it, but I don't think either of us knew, but you knew less than me. And I feel like what I said was honest, but I don't know if it was true.
well, I'm going to totally dodge your question with a better answer to a not question you didn't ask, which is um, something about like now after 10 to 12 years of doing this, what is community work? Like, what is community leadership? And so I'm not going to dodge your question. I don't think you tricked me. I think that we both had a learning journey to
Oh,
go on.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because when you first, because I still see this in people who join a neighborhood group or who get excited about and show up to help in community.
Yeah.
I see And maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but sometimes I just see the kind of the raw enthusiasm of
Yeah,
caring for people and connecting with people.
yeah.
That's very real. And I think that if we're building some graph here or something, it's like valence rings of an atom, of care. And so one of the valence rings is about like doing stuff in places with people. And it's great. And I love that part. And that's definitely a part at the beginning that was the most exciting to me. Doing lots of stuff in public, activating the public spaces that we should and could all have access to, and doing stuff together and making sure people are uplifted and cared for.
Because you were already doing events, so do you think that was? And I've got to know you better, and if I'd known more, I would have totally slid in more about the secret spaces. Like I know that you love to find those places that people don't know about that are inhabited and why they are. And I know you're a super curious dude. Like I knew
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but and I knew you cared. And then I thought, well, maybe you'd come along this journey with me.
Well, this is where
And
I think,
I just thought I don't want to be. That was maybe my first learning was I don't want to be alone doing this work.
yeah,
Like I think I have some things, but I don't know a lot, and I need someone's help, and I need someone I can who would trust and
geez,
love.
I think that might be the feeling you're trying to help share universally so that people don't
Okay.
feel. Isn't that because one of the things that built the charity that we work for is this notion that when people feel connected and when they feel that they belong, wellness follows, good things follow. Come
Something good's gonna
something
come
like
of
that.
yeah, like if
Conversely,
you're
when
seen and
when
heard.
when people feel isolated from one another and from people, and it seems silly, we all passed through the pandemic together, so we all learned it firsthand. But there's even there's even like public health science that says when you feel isolated, you 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 get unwell. You become unwell because we are social creatures, and so it makes sense to me that that was your impetus. I mean, I guess the just to finish the valence ring story, I think what we learned simultaneously and separately together is that community connection also has to make space for um, all the meat and potatoes, all the stories of power, empowerment, and disempowerment that go along with living in a
Yeah.
system. You're so much more eloquent at this stuff, but I'll take the first hack and you can edit me. But it's like when you live, if we can comfortably and without malice and without finger pointing, if we can comfortably acknowledge that we live in a capitalism, in a whole bunch of isms and systems that weren't really designed to care for people, they were designed to regulate people or control them.
Yeah. Or
So
separate
be
them.
it. This is
Yeah.
our landscape, but
Yeah.
how can we rewire those things? How can we acknowledge and rebuild them with care and community at the core? That was the second valence ring that was a little bit more surprising to me, of hearing people's stories of disconnection, disempowerment, not being seen, not being heard. Because if I tie it back to the bookshelf, what you might have recognized in me was an interest in knowing people, hearing people's stories, and making connections where possible.
Yeah.
But I
I would even sum it up in curiosity.
curiosity.
You were always like whether it was me or other people, you had an understanding or like you asked questions with enthusiasm. Like you wanted to know. And it felt genuine. Sometimes you're in a chat and you're like, someone's just kind of reading a script of questions. You're like, I think we're done here. But yeah, like what do we do? Like it some days I think we talk like why do we do it? And the simple thing is just meeting people and getting them to meet each other. Like it seems almost silly to say that. Like it feels what you just said is the world creates like our Western world is about individual success, individual failures, individualism.
Yeah,
But
right.
like it's been an intention to kind of separate us psychologically and even physically at times, right? So how do we just kind of stop that? And some of it's just by being in spaces.
Yeah,
You know, you've when you've been somewhere and someone actually even gets a moment of your time or like that event, they're recognized. It doesn't happen a lot to a lot of people and it's powerful. And I sometimes forget the small acts are as powerful as the big ones sometimes because I
yeah,
sometimes I sit in rooms where there's advocacy work to do and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate that and then bring that back to the community. But then I think, you know what, that potluck did more than those three committee meetings I went into
yeah.
the last month, right? Like
Surprise,
that's yeah,
surprise.
surprise, shocking. bureaucracy doesn't always lead to
Oh,
love and kindness and connection, but
it can though. I mean, it's there's a bit of a, pro enzyme and substrate model there. We need a total protein is made up of constituent
yeah,
parts, right?
like we need, I guess what part of our work has been, because we have 11 partners, we work with public health, all these folks, and part of our work is to, what did one of our folks say once, make them feel more like neighbors than institutions, right? Like
Mm.
they have stuff that, like needles, vaccines, whatever your opinion is. It's not like you and I are going to walk out tomorrow with a bunch of needles and vaccines and try and do that. Like there's stuff that community could use and need from these organizations, but they haven't always been kind.
Or
They
they
haven't
or
always used an equity model
centered people is
or
what you
centered in the
say.
work.
They
Like
haven't centered the community that they're trying to impact.
they're giving to them, not working with them, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, here's a bunch of things you need to do. It's like, why don't you ask us how we'd want to do it or if we even want to do it? So that's a huge part and it really hard to figure, but we do sit with them and sometimes we're like, that was cool, but what we heard was they'd rather that wasn't how you did it. And I know we're still proxies for those chats, but I guess in all of this, we're trying to, like, you're not different. You're public health, but and they're good
You're
partners, so I
still
don't mean to
people
use them
in
or any
community.
of our partners, right? You're also a community member. You're also a human. And I think it's worked in a way because they'll reach out and say, can we talk to you about something? We're really interested in meeting some folks or having a conversation. So there's little glimmers that that work is
What are
kind
your other whys? You said that's a why. Why you do the work you do.
I don't know. I guess now it feels like I don't know what else to do because I don't, this is the thing that it gives me purpose.
Okay, but
That's my selfish answer.
I'm pushing like what so lift the hood on that. Like what when you feel you have a sense of purpose, what's in there? So being in spaces with people, that's a great answer. I agree. What else, man? You
I
give
guess. Yeah, and I have we all have our own stories, but I didn't grow up with a lot of attachment and care. And then when I met Sarah, my partner, she changed that equation for me and literally changed the narrative of my life. And I always think, wow, like what I have that sometimes nightmare or dream of like, what if I hadn't gone to that festival and reconnected with her? Like I don't know. My life wouldn't have had a really positive trajectory, I don't think, because some of my family, it didn't go positively. So I guess that part of it is like, wow, how did I get so lucky to find love at an intersection where things could have gone really differently? So
yeah,
I guess that's the purpose I feel sometimes is like, isn't that cool
sharing
that
that.
I get to be in community? And if I'm the community at the start for someone, that's okay too. But the idea is like, there should be more, and you should have people who are going to care about you and show up for you. So I
You
guess that's the purpose.
yeah, yeah, okay, that's a great answer. Thanks for sharing that. Like you carry a success story of like
That's
right,
kind.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
carry the
Okay.
experience of finding care in a loving or a community or both setting and kind of want to give that to other people, which is very true for your work because I think most people like when you show up at a committee, you're making fun of committees a little bit, which is warranted sometimes. But when you show up in a committee or a room, or when you host an event, usually people feel better and more connected. I've seen it, and
That's
it's
nice.
yeah,
Thanks.
man, it's really powerful. I would say I would add a little bit of a why for me is that just because it's on theme here is that um, I think there's also so many things that bury people's gifts and passions as we grow up. There's
Yeah.
so many things that just cover over what you might actually love to do or give or share with other people. And
Or
so
you've been told they're
you've been told
useless
they're
or
not good or
worthwhile
they're not
or
going to
like
make you money
put it
or
away or
right.
like, yeah, yeah.
And in this job and in my life I've seen how when you can discover or when you can find a moment with somebody to see their gift or to see it applied, or when you create a space that allows them to bring their gifts out or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Gifts might not even be the right word, like skills, passions, hobbies,
Something they're just
dreams.
good at and they like we've always bristled at the word empowerment because it feels like I'm bestowing something on someone, right? It's like they're like what you said, they already have an innate ability to love and care and be in community and stuff they're excited about.
How do you deal with self-doubt and imposter syndrome? Or even how do you
Oh
define it
man.
first and then how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I guess part of me grew up not feeling worthy or conditionally cared for. So I didn't kind of had a kind of
Me too.
unsteadiness too, right? And I
Yeah.
know you did too. I guess part of it is like you mentioned earlier when we are talking that you see me in front of the room and I feel really confident. I guess part of what I do when I'm feeling wobbly or weak is I manifest what I see in the community and the people I've met. Not always a specific example, but that energy of I'm here for that. I may have feelings about myself today, one way or the other, but I've come to bring energy to a room about something. Later I might feel deflated or I
So
might
you
say to you,
fake it. You
well,
you fake
I
it until you make it.
I guess I bring a truth to the
I'm
energy I'm bringing to
I'm
the room. I
teasing. I'm
know.
teasing. Yeah.
But there are times, I do after I'm like, was that okay? Like it's almost like you've popped into a character that's authentic, but it's another voice. Because I'm kind of introverted and I'm a bit shy, weirdly at times. And then I'll say to you, "Is that
Did
okay?"
that work?
I
Yeah.
don't really
You
know, and I'm always a little doubtful after. But when I jump into it, I think, okay, like yeah, Geetha put language
that's
to
a
that,
great
right? Yeah,
answer. I mean, I believe that. I see that in you, and that's a great answer. But um, in some ways, that's you're not really dealing with imposter syndrome. You're drawing energy from the room and reflecting, um, reflecting back what you think is needed. Like I think it's a superpower to draw energy from the room and kind of be appropriate and responsive. But it might actually it might not actually be dealing with imposter syndrome or
should have
self
just
doubt.
said therapy then.
Therapy, yeah.
Therapies help, yeah,
No,
and I
I know. I
still do
still like
different
your
therapies.
answer.
Like I do that. Like I have to think. I've gone through this interesting program. It's caring for professionals or something. It was like a 10-week program, but it was kind of rooted in why would you be against yourself? And that's not anything I ever thought of before, but just so when I'm doing that, I'm not always successful, but I'm like, why am I what was the phrase? You should be on your own side.
Hmm.
And I think I was raised to doubt that or not be on my own side
Hmm.
or like that I wasn't valuable enough. So that's something I'm trying to embody a bit. Like why am I attacking myself right now? Who advantages to that? Like why would I do that? But I don't know. And what do you do? Like cuz
Well,
we
I'll
both share
answer.
this, right?
Yeah,
We both share
I will
an
answer, but let
uncertainty.
me have a crack at at I'll therapize you or whatever the word
Awesome.
is,
Do it. I
because
could use extra.
you you said so then you condensed it and said what therapy was your answer, but I in
It's one
some
of the
ways
things, like for
courage
sure.
like you okay so you so doubt and imposter syndrome we're trying to talk about how do we deal with that. I guess like one of the things that we need to say over and over again is you name it and you embrace it. That might be a step that people forget. Like, oh,
Okay.
I've got to eradicate it, or I've got to abolish it, or ignore it. But in you, in your life, and then in our work, and in a rippling out way in the neighborhood groups, we we're practicing naming it and sitting in it first. That's a really courageous thing to do, and it's a really important step. If you think, okay, maybe doubt is has a function. Maybe doubt keeps me from
Yeah.
being a tyrant, or maybe doubt
Right.
keeps,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, of
maybe
course.
my imposter syndrome is the voice that reminds me to think like other people, to not just inhabit an identity that I think is the right identity. It makes me keep questioning, um, if I am I supposed to be here and am I the right person? How are other people here and are they the right person? And how can I see that everyone is where they're supposed to be? Or so I feel like I feel like the word I actually probably don't know the word, but maybe authenticity is the word or vulnerable. Like these are kind of therapy words.
No,
Vulnerability,
they're not. They're
authenticity.
they're good.
Those are real for you and courage, and you bring that into to your work. And when you bring that into the work as the leader, titled leader of the organization, it brings permission and space for other people to work like that and to,
Well, Thanks.
So weirdly, by embracing imposter syndrome, um, you start to put it in its place instead of imagining getting rid of it. It's like you've built a smaller room for it. You can
There you
hang out here if you
there
want,
you go.
but we're gonna see when you are less important or less useful, than
And in
than
therapy language, it's almost like you're embracing that kid who felt horrible about themselves or they're doubted. Like I like that metaphor because it's not you're trying to hold them. Like what I think is that comes from a youth, like a hurt that is stuck with me with life. And if I can say, hey, dude, like we've said it about our kids sometimes. If we were talked to or treated the way we were as kids, we couldn't imagine doing that with our children. So sometimes you have to give yourself that chat, like little Brendan, for lack of a better way of saying it, is like, it's okay,
little b.
little B. And you, okay, let's get to you
Well,
because you
okay,
you inhabit imposter
I'm not
syndrome
gonna
too.
say same thing he said, but in some ways, same thing you said. I think maybe the second part that I hear you say is if you so I face imposter syndrome like every second. I think like, wow, man, why do I get to do this? Or am I behaving aptly? Sort of is my question's more like, am I good enough? I guess is the
Yeah,
question. Am I good enough?
yeah.
Do I deserve this? And so one of your answers was you ask, like you say, was that good enough? And I think there's a clue in there. If you try to tackle imposter syndrome and doubt alone, good luck. Like,
It's like trying to do surgery on
yeah.
yourself, right? It's not
So
gonna
you're
it's
you
not
you
gonna have a good
basically
outcome.
you reach out. So one of the ways I approach it, and I think you do, and maybe you taught me this, is you intentionally build up a family of people that you can trust and go to vulnerably and not selfishly. Like you can ask them, am I doing the right thing? Am I the right person? How am I screwing up here? And then you stay open to the feedback. In some ways, those are the forces of community building. This is kind of what I was talking about
Yeah, as you
earlier.
say it, it's kind of
It's not
back
just
to our model,
having
right?
barbecues in the park with your friends, right? It's also hearing back how we're failing as a system and as leaders and being open and accountable to that and then trying to change together, right? And so like dealing with imposter syndrome is actually a lot easier when you do it as a community expression without dumping your crap on people, right? It's not like we can't expect people just to handle our problems, but when you share appropriately and vulnerably, it actually opens this space up where we can all talk about it together.
Listen, I guess it keeps coming back to what we were saying is like nothing happens alone. Like I hate to bring it back to like the business world of stuff, but when I hear someone say they're self-made, usually they're rich people and it's clearly they weren't self-made, but in the world it's impossible, right? It's literally impossible to be self-made. And also, why would you want to? Like I imagine
Well,
that like you're an
to
isolated
have
person
power over people,
in an
maybe.
island and you've created your own person. It feels like a very horrible idea for kindness in the world. Or
Yeah.
like it's a lie. I always when someone says it, I usually if they're new, I'll gently say, "Huh, really? No one's helped you?" So it's a very it goes with our Western model of individualism, but when you go back to it, like everything's better with other people, except maybe a nap, or even that's not too bad. But like we're
A
better with
meal.
each other,
A
right?
meal.
That's the thing. And weirdly, as Western, especially white dudes, it's how things were. Like indigenous people, they already were living that reality. And then we've been separated from that reality. So it's like we're going back to, we're learning from that. And how do we just want to be together. So, at the event, or last couple events we've had, there's been some folks who've been away from the coalition, whether they've moved or just life took them somewhere else, who've come back, like Kate and Chris and a few folks that and they've kind of, joyously said, "Wow, things have happened like beyond what they thought." And I think what they kind of hint at is say is like, there's a lot of people in this room who I've never met. First, just a lot of new people first, and then the room looks very different than when we left. And, you know, it might be a kind way of saying it's just not a lot all white people hanging out in this space.
This is an awesome topic, and this is going to be we could talk about this forever, which is good. We should keep talking about this
Well, that's it. It is a
because
forever chat.
we if we I'm pretty sure that if we walked through our lives and lived in a um, in a city where, now I don't want to use the word diversity,
Yeah.
but
I'll
now,
just
no,
look at you
you
like,
look at me,
geez, he's
wink at me
doing it.
every
Yeah,
time. But
yeah,
when you
yeah,
live
okay.
in a city where people with lots of different life experiences and backgrounds and aspirations are somehow colliding and collaborating, it would be so false to then build up a community organization that didn't also have those people and embrace the same collisions and collaborations, right? And so I guess maybe it's oversimplifying it to say there's a tension in living in a geographical area with people from different backgrounds and experiences, and you can you could shy from that tension, you could hate that tension, or you could resent it, or you could lean into it and think the tension is important, and so the more we get to know people from different experiences, whether that's, folks who live in poverty, who have lived in intergenerational poverty, or folks with different, racial and ethnic backgrounds who aren't that really happy to just, you know, be told to conform, or, just take on the customs that weren't even yours or your family's. The more we kind of spend time with folks and sort of get to know their lives, the more it makes sense that we embrace this notion of just like, you know, open-minded tapestry of differences that work together.
Yeah. And
Is
I
that,
think, yeah,
am
no,
I onto something there?
I
Or
think it's like the defensive too, how you let it go. And I think the word charity in itself already hints at, you know, because sometimes I'll bristle at folks who want to be helpful because they have an old charitable model of giving down to people, not collaborating or being
serving
in
people,
community with
right?
them. And I
What's so
think,
what's the difference? Like you just
like, I have stuff, you're downtrodden, whatever the old language was. I'm going to give you some stuff and you're going to be very grateful to me, publicly or not, but you're going to, I'm someone who can give you stuff and you're someone who can take stuff, not we're humans in this weird, beautiful cosmic stew together, and life has given you a lot of hurdles that it didn't give me. Why don't we see what we do together?
so because you're we're asking a question of like why do we actually attract a diverse population of people to our events, but also,
And
you're
to participate now
to
in
show up,
neighborhood
to
groups.
engage,
Yeah.
because you're also saying, um, you know, lowering barriers, right, to access is
Yeah.
one of the things. But then, how are we even how are we even on people's radar? How are the neighborhood groups? How is the GNSC, the coalition of neighborhood groups, even showing up on people's radar? And I think the other part of what you were saying is when when we receive feedback as people or as an organization, we are kind of using it as a learning opportunity, or I don't want
As we grow, we're trying
a
to,
growing opportunity or a
and I'm
learn
still defensive and weird, and I'm trying not to be, but more and more as we grow, it's more like, oh, yeah, yeah,
and prove like what is it, standing behind that as a principle rather than um, I think you were also starting to say that other places in urban living will reprimand you or dismiss you if you have something critical to say. If a system isn't working for you and you try to ask for an accommodation or a change that you probably already deserve, then sometimes those systems punish you and shut you out. I'm sorry, this isn't for you, or you're
like,
causing a stink and we're kicking you out, or what?
right.
Like
Like
it's
explicitly or
yeah,
implicitly, like we
yeah.
know why you didn't get allowed to do that thing.
Whereas I think that your leadership style, but also the leadership in the neighborhood groups, the people who are
Yeah,
kind of on the
doing the
ground
work.
doing stuff, comes from a place of, yeah, and not to put rose-colored glasses on because it doesn't always work, but
No,
it
of
comes
course
from a
not.
place of yes, yes, let's try it, or yes,
There you
I'm
go.
I'm open
Yeah,
to it, but it also comes from a culture of um what is it like? forward mistake making. Like we are making
Yeah.
mistakes. We know
And
this.
we always
The
will.
humility of dropping your defensiveness is to say, okay, somewhere I'm not including someone here, or somewhere
Or I'm going to
something we're
do or
doing
say something.
might not feel good for someone else, but we're going to be open to the feedback that it's not working, and we're going to do our best to kind
It's
of,
beautiful and messy. And let's stay in that space, right?
and
Where it
let's
doesn't.
include your feedback and your voice. And if you so for example, you know, not that all of our stuff is space based, but you're talking about events. How do we even get a diverse crowd at our event? You know, and it's that it's over time, um, we would make, you know, those little changes that were probably brought to us, like, okay, we need to be
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
order a taxi, or
Like
we
we're
need,
trying to self-learn, but folks would
thanks for
say,
having free food there. It's
but
wonderful to eat with people, but you had nothing for vegan people, or
gluten-free or
whatever,
like culturally, like, I don't want to eat that food. And
or
you're
you
like,
even remember when we made that one mistake. We programmed an event that was social connection and food. Come out and meet your neighbors and eat. And we programmed it during Ramadan. That was
right, yeah,
and we were
right,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
first courageous person to say, that kind of excludes a lot of people.
Yeah, of
Like,
course, right? And it's that awareness, especially as white leaders, which happens a lot in our community. How do you like, of course there's an implicit distrust. There should be like white leaders have often caused some harm. So how do you, and again, I think it's maybe curiosity and authenticity. I know we keep coming back to those words, but what you just said is I've heard from other people, even organizational people, who are like, well, just go talk to Brendan and Dan in the GNSC. They'll probably find a way, or they'll start with a yes or at least a strong maybe.
yeah,
And I think some of that just gets out in the community. It's like, so we get a lot of people just reaching out going, I didn't know who to ask, or I've asked some other people and they've just said no. Would you be up for a chat? And we're usually, sometimes to the chagrin of our board, it's like stop saying yes to things. But I think that's how we got here, was saying, well, why not try it? Like if it's the bar's low, it doesn't cost $1 million. We have some spaces, we have some capacity to try something, then why not do it and see what happens with it? And like you said, we have a friends at Art Not Shame, and I won't swear, but they had a program called F Perfect. And it's another phrase that sticks in my head. It's like perfection's a weird Western individualistic capitalist idea that
mm,
somehow you'll attain perfection.
mm.
And we know that's just a lie. It's a lie that keeps us from doing things. So why not just go for it? And sometimes we've fallen a bit on our face, but through joy and experimentation, not through constriction and fear. Like we're going out there and we're like, "Ooh, well, that was weird," or we
Yeah,
tried. And sometimes you prep as much, and other times, like even at the volunteer event, you'd had a clipboard and you had notes that you wanted to share, and you forgot it. Oh well, we're still gonna have a fun event. Like you could get caught up in the
yeah,
fear of like, we'd had all this planned, or Geetha kept saying, "Remember our agenda set at 6:45," and I was like, a lot of people wanted to talk. Like it's
yeah.
how do you adhere to something so people have, like, don't waste their time, but also people
Make it
get together in the
flexible
assemblies
enough.
they want to
And
talk. So I think it's opening up to that. And then, when we met Mo, I didn't know a ton about smaller community, but hey, Mo, there's Mo.
I
But
mean,
then the more we've learned, and you've learned more, and we've got to hang around with Muslim community members. Nasser used to work with us, and just through contact with people and being curious and
but what,
being interested in what their world thing, their worldview, their world context, and all the intersections. Like sometimes it's that and poverty, right? It's not. It's rarely or never one thing. It's like
yeah.
I'm a white dude Canadian. Well, that's a pretty reductionist
I mean,
statement, and I don't know.
let me
I don't
jump
even
in
know
though,
how to hold that.
because you're also you're talking about, like, I like this and I agree with you, but you're talking about kind of the end, the result is, I guess we're approachable as an organization or something like that.
Maybe that's
But
just it.
what is it, you know, um, I'm trying to dig into kind of what have we learned in a decade of working with community that leads to not only being curious about and seeking diversity of connection and audience and participants and collaborators. But so not just seeking it and wanting it, but also proving or owning or showing up in a safe way, in a,
Yeah.
and I think like, I think back to the days when, you know, we were learning together that here's a small example, and I might be way off track, so please jump in if I'm
Sure.
off, but something like, when people who have been, let's say a system, or let's say they've been cut off from connection, and or they've been, you know, they've been cut off from housing, from appropriate housing, which also cuts them off from community and neighbors. And maybe they've been labeled something frustrating, or,
Right.
broke
Right.
or
Yeah.
whatever. And so they've been
Problematic.
disempowered
Yeah.
by
Like
by
whatever it is.
systemic
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Then how could they possibly show up but with some anger and fire and
Yeah. Right.
distrust, and so when
But
people.
even that isn't it like, I don't want to stop you, but even that, I've seen some folks in other orgs as well, friends of mine, and it's like organizations will bristle at that sometimes for whatever the reason
That's
is.
where I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
We well, no, no, it's good that
I
we
came
got there
right to the
together.
punchline.
It's that we had to learn in so you talked about meeting me at the bookshelf, and if in a customer service situation,
Yeah,
if someone's frustrated and angry and gets vocal and starts confronting a system that isn't serving them, usually that's like a security guard gets called, or you know what I
right. Or
mean, like
like,
something
or I'm not
happens.
giving you the thing you
Right.
came here for, or your appointment's canceled, or whatever
Yeah,
it might
because
be, right?
because there's this sort of intimation, or this actually explicit moment of like, you have failed as a customer, or you
Right.
have, you
Like
know
you've decorum or civility, like some weird term that you didn't show up with my expectations.
now
So
we're
now you
focusing
can't have,
on anger, but I'm
no, but
trying to build
it's
I'm trying to build I'm trying to build out from this to say people show up to their neighbors and their neighborhood groups with very different life experiences. And so for us to expect them to all talk and express and share and ask in a certain way that's pleasant, or
yeah,
that's safe, or that whatever is, you know is sort of ludicrous. It's an unfair
it's
expectation.
mean. It's
So
all the things,
what
right?
have
It's
we
just,
done? Because this is a lesson we keep learning, and hopefully we keep learning and
yeah,
growing on this. But what is it, if you had to essentialize it, or even make a list of, like, you know the things that we've learned about not judging somebody and categorizing them and
yeah,
labeling them when they're coming forward to ultimately seek connection and collaboration.
right. Even what you just said, the energy they bring, it's because there's a lacking piece of that, right? They may come with a certain attitude, but it's because they haven't had the care and love or attention. Like they wouldn't show up if they wanted to be angry and alone. So it's that. I think even when you're talking, I think of the word, like what we're trying to build is it isn't transactional. It's not a one-off conversation or a thing. Like we're trying to build a connection,
Yeah.
and it's not like sometimes you'll go somewhere and you get a thing, and that makes sense. I
Yeah.
go to the Shoppers Drug Mart and get a prescription. But even there, I end up with chats with the pharmacist. Now I know them. But there's some things it's okay. You just had to go pick up some milk. But in community, you need more than that, and you need.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to build, and our staff do, and we do, I guess I hear over and over, is that you're going to have a conversation and see where it leads. And again, maybe it's a yes. So then maybe a community member like Mo in the Somali community might say, "Hey, we had a really positive experience with the GNSC," or Brendan or Dan to another community they meet, or a friend can say it to someone else. And then I think those testing of those boundaries, and if there's a little bit of success or a little bit of embracing, then someone else might step forward. And as you go through time, you're gonna have missteps, but I think that's what we're trying to build is like, why don't we try and do something together? And we're not doing it, there's a reciprocity to that, right? It's not, we're not doing it to say, now we're the most diverse organization
Right.
in Guelph, or
That's just
can
a
I put you
badge.
on our poster next week and have you shake our hand in front of a camera? Like, I'm sure
Though,
that happens, but there's part of it that it's just, it's kind of
you,
fun to be
let
together.
me jump in there, because you're making me realize something here on the spot, is that you know, you also, I like when you use the language around sort of who's being centered here, who's being, because there's ultimately somebody or some group or something that's being focused on in any room, and you can shift the
Yeah.
focus,
Yeah.
but it starts somewhere. You've come together for a reason. And I think maybe one thing that, you've taught me and other people have taught and embodied is that if we stuck to just our mission of like supporting the 17 neighborhood groups across the city of Guelph, then we would color within the lines of those 17 groups. But sometimes we have to shift the focus, shift the center onto a collaborator that isn't a neighborhood group, but is infusing neighborhoods or infusing neighborhood work. So I'm just realizing you said something about putting them on a poster because we don't want to just tokenize communities or diversity,
Right.
but
We're trying to move away from
but
that,
it
or
is cool that sometimes we do intentionally make this big colorful poster and it's centering, instead of our organization or the Brant Avenue neighborhood group, one neighborhood group, we're centering the Arab community of Guelph or something, right? We shift our focus a
like
bit,
work in partnership or
working
collaboration
in
with it. Yeah,
partnership,
yeah.
supporting, and so
Or even that was Chinese festival. Some of the folks were from the Clarefields neighborhood that we got to know from the Chinese community, and they wanted to like it. It's not. It's the unsiloing of things, right? Like
yeah.
they wanted to do something that wasn't specifically a neighborhood, but everyone lives in a neighborhood. Like we could extend that metaphor out. Like when we started, it was very geographic based, and it still is. Like we have to at some point, but
There's
neighborhoods cross. It's like
right.
squirrels run
This is
from
where I'm trying
neighborhood
to
to
go. Thank
neighborhood,
you.
right? Like
Where are
critters
the
run around. We're not
where are
gonna
the
stay in our
definitions
box.
and the
Yeah,
boundaries
yeah.
more porous than we're letting on?
And the answer is yeah. You know the answer is yes, but you're posing it as a question. But we know it's true. Like they were saying, I have friends in the north. Can they come to our program in the south? Because there's a part where you're still trying to figure out, is this an organization that's going to punish me if I let someone from Brant come to my program here? And the answer is no. What do you need in your community, and how does that work? Some of the communities want to contain it because those folks don't have access to certain things, and people from another community coming in might push them out of accessing that yoga night or that program. So, it's up to, I guess it comes down, it's up to that group. But isn't it more fun when we get them all together and I see groups like that mapping thing we did at the volunteer, they met people they'd never met and other groups, and I'm
Yeah,
like, I want that. Like they'll go through us till they
yeah,
meet each other, and then it's like, oh, I ended up working with the Westminster group
right.
and they had this thing and they lent it to us, or they showed us how to do this thing, or like that's when it's being generative like that. You think, okay, it's starting to work.
Yeah, that's a good
And
thanks.
then
That's a
that's
good
that's where I
story.
see how different communities start interacting and know they can ask each other for help. Crush it into a very dense atom of what should people from today, this chat, what do you hope people heard or you'd hope they'd carry in their day? I know it sounds like, give us your most profound nugget that everyone will now change their life. So
Pass,
go. It's like
pass.
the game show.
Yeah.
Pass.
Um,
Next question.
well, this here's where okay. Here's where we started this chat a little bit talking about the opportunity of being in a community-based role means you get to be included in so many people's lives and stories, and you get the chance to honor them and see them for who they are, right? And it could be performative. I think this is what we've been framing our chat. It could be something you just do as your day job or you do as your course of action representing your organization, or it could be genuine and authentic. And so I kind of roll my eyes when I see other people say this. It doesn't feel
Sure. I'll
satisfactory.
roll mine for you
You could
if
roll
that
your eyes
helps.
at me,
Okay. Yeah.
but I guess my takeaway is from my aspirations and from my experience, my tiny and very subjective experience at this community job in this community, I would say when you have the opportunity to build an authentic and genuine relationship with somebody or some group, not to advance your own status or your own
Yeah.
success, but to
That's good.
genuinely just connect with somebody, it's probably going to feed you and shift who you are and what mission you're on. And it's probably going to feed them in some way that you don't get to control, and
Right.
you don't
Yeah.
need to have control over the outcome. But there's nourishment there in genuine connection. So when you have the opportunity to drop the artifice, or to investigate that imposter syndrome, or to face your judgments and let them go ahead and
Yeah.
have
Your
your judgments.
expectations, your judgments,
Yeah,
all those things, right?
have
Like
them. They're gonna
you're gonna walk
just
in with some.
park them
You can't help it.
afterwards
You're
and
human.
go back
Right.
open and yeah, that's my takeaway. When
Okay.
you have the opportunity to make genuine and authentic relationships, it is a force for building connection and that web of community that will ultimately be good for all of us.
Good.
So I'll flip it back on you.
Okay.
Was that one thing? Did I?
You kind of, yeah. I think you.
what
I
is
think
the
you got a ball of something
what is
there.
the
Like,
takeaway for all of our yammering banter?
all right. I'm gonna go back to love. Like, I think I'll just do it as a personal thing, and I hope it resonates in the org. And I could think of it both ways, but I think most days what I'm trying to do or morning is ask myself the question, or even out of a situation, did I act with as much love as kindness as I, looking back, did I do that? Did I try to do it? And if I didn't, how could I do that better tomorrow? Like, did I respond with love and kindness or caring? Because some days I can be snarky. You can have a bad day, and it's natural. But if I didn't, what could I do better tomorrow? Is it a kind and loving response to whatever that is, or the energy I bring to a space? So I think that's it. If that's a question you have the capacity to ask yourself, and not everyone does, I know that's even a privileged question. Is I don't know, did I do that? And if I didn't, why not? And could I do better today? So that's okay. Each day is a new version of that question and answer for me. So that's how I want to. That's what I hope people would take away.